Get a better understanding of Turkey's fight against terrorism. I'm joined now by Josh Walker. He is a Transatlantic Fellow with the German Marshall Fund. That's a nonpartisan think tank right here in Washington. And Josh, talk to me about this because in a sense, it's a twofer. You strike at Turkey, but you also know that there's going to be Western tourists there. I mean, you know this area well. This is a tourist site. So the terrorists really put a lot of thought into this, didn't they?
Yeah, they either put a lot of thought into this or they got lucky in some ways, because I think after the attack happened, the fact that the Turkish authorities identified the individual almost immediately and said this is a Syrian-born individual, they have some type of connection to ISIL, that tells you that this person was probably under a watch at some point in time, and I think they were prepared for more attacks. The bottom line is, ever since this summer, after the horrific attacks in Ankara, Turkey's been geared up for this. It's very clear if you host over 2 million Syrian refugees, you're on the border and on the front line against ISIL. This is gonna happen. The question is, now that this has happened, you've struck at the heart of a major tourist site, a European capital in terms of an Istanbul. What does this lead to in terms of Turkey's reaction? It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
What's your sense?
I do think that Turkey is going to redouble of its efforts, but Turkey really is doing almost everything in its power. The problem is the border is so porous. There are so many sympathizers of ISIL. They did not focus on ISIL until this past summer. There have been 4 years worth of connections back and forth. I think Turkey is going to try to mobilize the international community. The question is the United States, are its European allies willing to actually fix the problem? The problem doesn't lie in Turkey. It lies across the border in Syria. There's not political will to get that fixed.
You know, talk though more broadly, because I mean, you touched on a couple of the elements, the fact that it's a porous border. We've done a number of stories about ISIL sympathizers going in. You've got ISIL sympathizers in Turkey, but they've been so concentrated on the PKK, the Kurds. They shot down the Russian jet. I mean, there's so many things. It's a big, giant stew there, in a sense, and they're kind of moving all around. I think it's almost whack-a-mole, isn't it?
It really is, and this is what makes it so difficult and combustible, because Turkey sits at the center of a geography, as you just described, where major international powers have all come together, and the question is, what will Turkey do next? Because Turkey's a major player in NATO. It has the ability to call those Article 4 and maybe even Article 5 resolutions, which means that it would force the international community to do something. After the Paris attacks, you saw what the French did, which was to increase strikes. The question is, after this, will Turkey do more in terms of basically targeting ISIL directly, or are the United States and Turkey on different pages when it comes to the Kurds of Syria and northern Iraq? That seems to be the largest question right now. What direction will Turkey go? Can it use the international sympathy and the outpouring of support coming and turn that into a tangible tool to really finally go after ISIS? Everybody believes that, you know, ISIS is a threat, including the Russians and the Iranians. The problem is no one seems to have the political will of what comes next.
But in a sense, haven't they created this monster themselves in some respects by turning a blind eye to ISIS, concentrating more on the PKK?
I think that's a criticism I hear a lot. I think it's a little bit unfair for a few reasons. Number one, the PKK has been around for the last 3 decades. They've killed far more people than any attacks that ISIL has done. And although ISIL is horrible, and it continues to be a horrible group in terms of its Islamic fundamentalism, the problem here is that until you solve the PKK and you bring the Kurds into a political solution, Turkey's on its own against the PKK, whereas with ISIL, everybody's unified. So I think it's hard for the Turks. They feel like they're alone in this fight against PKK, and they get frustrated sometimes when they see international condemnation of ISIL, but not the same of the PKK.
All right, Josh, thanks so much for coming in. A great perspective from you. You know the region well. So
thanks for having me.